Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of AZ Update. I'm your host, Anthony Bartolo, and today I am joined by a special co host, Christina Warren. Christina, how's it going?
It's good. It is early
I
here
know
right
it's
now.
it's early for you, Pacific time. Very appreciative. You've been with us since 6:30 Pacific time, and I love it. You and I have been geeking out with producer Pierre in the back end, talking about gadgets and gizmos. We've gone through Blackberries and Windows phones and Windows mobile devices, and all through the gamut, and rightfully so, because your past history and all the amount of knowledge that you've amassed all this time. There was a big announcement this week,
Yeah,
right?
kinda. Yeah, yeah.
This is a tiny announcement of a new device. I think I have one here. It's this one. Is it? Is it? I was actually showing producer Pierre this before you came on. I just dropped it before we came on the call. Look how
Great.
thick this thing is.
I know, but it's beautiful. It's
And
beautiful.
look at the
Yeah.
camera.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. This is the current one. This is the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Terrible name. And that is the original one. And it's hilarious how much smaller it is, but also how much thicker it is. And
the reason we bring this up too is because there was an interesting announcement in regards to the 12 Pro in terms of use of augmented reality. And I bring this up only because it's such an interesting thing now that Apple is now joining suit in regards to the augmented reality piece. I've always said that augmented reality is the new UI. In the way that we interface with data. It's not replacing anything. It's just a new way to experience this. I'm so excited to have this chat with you just because you're like just as passionate about gadgets. What does that mean in regards to the whole LiDAR offering and everything that's going on with the 12 Pro?
yeah, so just for some background for people who aren't familiar, Apple announced their iPhone 12 this week, and there are a number of different models, but with the 12 Pro and the 12 Pro Max, it includes a LiDAR feature, as Anthony just mentioned. This actually was first introduced on the iPad Pro that came out, I think, like earlier this year, and kind of the refreshed iPad Pro. And basically, what this is that it's got this, sensor in it that's going to basically make it much, much easier for you to do real-time 3D capture with your phone. Before you could do it on an iPad, now you can do it, with your phone. And Apple has been playing with AR for a few years now. I think going back to like the 10s, they created something called AR Kit, which is one of their SDKs that's built into iOS, so that people can build some sort of kind of augmented reality type of apps. Like there's an app that's actually built into iOS called like Measure, where you can actually do completely accurate measurements of as long as you can find a surface to measure, of length and width and height and things like that. Which is actually great for me because I never have a tape measure, and so I just use my phone, which is awesome. But the LiDAR piece, as you mentioned, like that's I think kind of going to take it to another level, because that's going to potentially really let you do some very high-powered 3D capture, which could be really interesting if you think about. Yes, I think the obvious place we go is, okay, well, what if you have some sort of headset where you could, create some sort of experience? But even if you don't, being able to, get a full 3D representation of something and upload it and then be able to use it and place it in another field of view, that could open up AR to a whole bunch of people. And I think that's why we're talking about it, because even though not everyone's going to have an iPhone, for better or worse, when an iPhone has something, that means it goes mainstream to a certain extent, and we see bigger adoption in other areas, and we see more commercial support. We see more developers, frankly, I think, getting interested in wanting to invest and even building experiences around that. So I think for me, that's what I see. I see the potential of, okay, if the iPhone has this LiDAR built in, and there are some really interesting potential experiences that people could build, whether it's with a web application or mobile application or something else, even if it's not for even an Apple device, just kind of opening up their mindset about what does that future interface, as you pointed out, look like? Because I agree with you. I do feel like the future of the user interface in a lot of ways is going to be AR based. And but one of the barriers that we've had so far, we don't have the headsets, but beyond that, it's like, how do we capture and start getting our real world objects? How do we digitally capture them in a way that we can manipulate them without having to have expensive scanners and that sort of thing?
I think this takes us one step closer. And the reason why I bring this up in terms of its interest is because, like you said, you now have the ability to replicate 3D objects using this device, and its accuracy is a lot better. I bring this up only because with Azure spatial mapping capabilities, this is going to herald in a new era in regards to sharing of content and experiences. In regards to, if I capture this 3D model of a toy, and a child is, in another area of the country or a place of the world, it gives you that ability to have that interaction between the two in a virtualized plane in an augmented sense. So virtualized plane, augmented sense in real world, and the possibilities are endless. It's like you could, the whole premise of Minecraft and the fact that you have this fictitious world and you're building out the blocks and you're building out these grandiose structures, but you're doing it in this television screen. And then we launched the whole, the Minecraft world and having the ability to build stuff, but it's still not truly interactive between multiple people because you'll have this area and you'll build it up and somebody else can see it, but there's not you building it simultaneously. Now I can be building here, you can be replicating it, in your office in Seattle, and you have the ability to, both of us are putting bricks together and we're seeing this coming in real life. And it is a net new technology in regards to Apple's offering in the LiDAR piece. Obviously, augmented reality has been around for a while, but this now net new interface can still be coupled back into a backend like spatial mapping, like the foundational stuff that's out there. And it's just going to, like you said, this is, when for better or for worse, when an organization like Apple goes forward and incorporates this, everybody takes notice. Everybody's going to now taking an even deeper look into augmented reality capabilities. And I think it's just going to be, that much more adoption and more acceptance more than anything in regards to this whole, augmented offering.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And I mean, it's too soon to say because, the phones aren't out yet. I think some of them are for pre-order today. The one I want, I won't be able to get for another few weeks, but it will be interesting to see, I think, if people can use some of the SDKs and some of the things with the camera, if they'll have access to the sensors, if there could be ways that you could upload that data to something like Azure, and if you could use some of that stuff. I think that would be really interesting, right? To say, because it's interesting, I think, to do it locally on the device, but I also think it would be interesting to take that piece. It's like, okay, I can locally capture this 3D object in this 3D space, but what if I can now, transfer that to the cloud so that it could be used or accessed in different ways. And so I think that opens up some interesting things too. It's too early to really think about what that looks like, but it's interesting at least.
It's the possibilities, right? Even because the fact that you have the compute power on the edge now with these devices, the ability to make it self-aware, to make it understand what it's looking at, and maybe the attributes of a toy train and knowing how it goes along on the track, and it recognizing that it's a toy train, so it automatically creating the attributes for that augmented visualization elsewhere, using stuff, using services like cognitive services and computer vision to then, I know this is a train, I know how this operates, it'll automatically recreate the train track and the train, and then you embed that into a Minecraft world, even though it's not technically a Minecraft train, but knows that how it's to interact with the environment, right? So just it's so interesting to see just our perception of how augmented reality is going to be taken now, because a company like Apple, backed by other organizations like Microsoft, have the services made available, but now the interest is going to really start to snowball because of what's being offered. What was that, Producer Pierre? We're not going to go down that path. Oh, geez. And that's why Producer Pierre is behind the scenes.
No, I love it. I was going to say, I like the snark. I think the audience appreciates that, but I'm not going to take the bait, Pierre. I'm not going to take the bait.
Too easy, right? Too easy. Let's start with the news. First up, I'm just going to bring up my screen here. Apologize. Okay, so first up, we have the availability now for the Microsoft 365 App Center. Of course, there's a bit of delay on my machine here. So now you have the ability. You had the ability before to understand your tool set and your app health of your applications within Office 365. Now you have the ability to produce a security report. So for those individuals that are using the applications, are they using them correctly? Are they adding on the specific rights to the documents if the document is a sensitive document, what have you? Is there, there's an app inventory also being made available specifically to M365, Office 365 applications, and governance in regards to that. Are these individuals supposed to have these applications? This also incorporates into applications that are being created under Office 365. So if you're creating your Power Apps for automation, who gains access to the rights of specific apps to run, to make changes to, all that functionality being made available. And then servicing profiles. So are you an administrator? Are you an end user? Are you a cashier? Are you in accounting? What profile fits the needs of what you're trying to accomplish with these applications, and what rights do you have access to? Prior to, there was a plethora of third-party applications that made this available. Now Microsoft offering this within Office 365 admin makes it available for one single pane of glass to gain knowledge and understanding of how the applications are being utilized, if they're being done in a proper way based on your organization's rights and needs and possible ISO standards that they have to adhere to. From the single pane of glass. The only thing that you have to take in consideration is your Office apps level has to be at version 2007 or higher for you to take advantage of the Microsoft 365 apps. We've shared this story, as we always do, for AZ Update on itopstalk.com. This blog post that we've actually provided a link to also provides a full-on step-by-step instructional on how to go and gain access to this tool. This tool is currently in preview. It has not gone GA yet, so be mindful of that. Not to really run this in production just as yet, but to actually go through and test out the functionality, and do provide your feedback. And we say this a lot on the show because the services that are being created are based on the feedback that you, the audience, and our customers for Microsoft are putting forth the suggestions and creating the solutions. And when we create these solutions and the services are created by our engineers, we want to make sure that we're following our best foot forward in terms of enabling the proper services that are required by you and our audience. So definitely test it out, provide your feedback, and let us know what can we add and what needs to be changed, if anything.
Great stuff. Great stuff. I like the fact that it goes all the way back to Office 2007, actually.
Well, no, it's actually not Office 2007. It's version 2007 of the Office apps offering. I know it gets confusing sometimes in terms of the update.
Okay.
Yeah,
see,
so
that makes more sense. I was like, that's going back really far. I was like, that's. I thought that was out of release. Okay, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No,
right. No. But that actually makes complete sense. Version 2007. Okay. So
I do that all the time.
That's probably a 2016, maybe 2019. I don't know, but okay, that makes sense. All right.
So that's specifically to the Office apps offering, right, within Microsoft 365. I do that all the time. I hear version update 2002. I'm like, what? What do you mean 2002? Why wouldn't you name it something better? Why would you do? And so it is confusing. But yes, so you do need version 2007 or update 2007 in order to take advantage of this. And it is in preview. So it's the one thing I want to make sure that I emphasize, because a lot of people will watch the show and they'll run with it in production, like,
right.
Whoa,
like no, wait, it's still in preview, still testing things out. Yeah. Test it out. Give the feedback. Look out for the bugs.
Yes.
Not GA just yet.
That's the big. Right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Provide the feedback. Not in GA just yet.
Yes. All right, Christina, you're up next.
All right. So this, I am.
So while Christina sets that up, oh, she's got it up. There you go.
Yeah. Do you see it?
Yep.
All right. So this is cool. This is actually something we were talking about cognitive services a little bit earlier, and this is a breakthrough within Azure AI. This is actually coming in partnership with the Microsoft research team. Basically, they've used Azure's AI cognitive services and the computer vision API to generate computer-generated captions AI-generated captions for photographs. And this is actually a really interesting AI problem. And so with AI computer vision, what's been able to happen for a number of years now, and we've seen this happen over the years, is that people, the AI is getting better and better at being able to identify what things and objects are. And so you can, goes to some of the really famous, examples of like, is this a hot dog? Is this something else? And it can kind of tell what things are. Well, this goes a little bit of a step further and instead can actually create very detailed and grammatically correct English captions for what is in a photograph that, according to a research paper, which is linked in this blog post that Microsoft Research submitted to a peer-reviewed academic journal, is actually better than some human written captions. But just to kind of show what the before and after were, kind of the old and the new, this is really interesting. For instance, the old caption using the old system before it upgraded said something like, a man is riding a skateboard up the side of a building. And the new one shows that it's a baseball player catching a ball. Also, this is an image showing, the legacy captioning system would basically identify this saying, a man in a blue shirt. The new one says, it's a few people wearing surgical masks. This one was one of my favorites. This is a person sitting at a sunset. This is actually a picture of a fire, and now it says, a campfire on the beach. And obviously some of these images that they're choosing, this one's actually a difficult one you could see from a computer vision standpoint because it is pretty complex. It's a simple image, but because of the colors that are used and because of the shapes, the initial legacy said a close-up of a person cooking a hot dog on a cutting board. But now the updated one, which is correct, it says, a person making bread. And so these are some really interesting, challenges to come about in terms of identifying what objects are, and then using the next level of AI and cognitive services to then create these very readable and grammatically correct descriptions. This is really cool, and so this is something that already they pushed into production, and it's basically they've said they've reached parity with humans, with human captioners. The reason I think this is exciting, not just because of what it says about where we are with computer vision and also with machine translation and with AI generated text and sentences, but I think that for things like accessibility, one of the biggest things you can do for accessibility is to have image descriptions. And so many of us don't do that, or if we do, they're not as descriptive as they could be. And so if there is a process where you could automatically have a service like Cognitive Services generate a very good description of what your images are, then you could have those in your image tags, and that would go a long way towards making things a lot more accessible.
And that's huge, right? Like the API is being available for the solution, makes it easier for developers to include this into their applications for inclusiveness. And I know it's a big focus that Microsoft has in terms of the applications that are being built out, even in the hardware that's being built out for that inclusive capability. This is awesome because it has that real world use right out of the gate in terms of what we've learned for cognitive services and custom vision to this point, that we're, the service is so good that it's at parity with humans now. It makes it that much easier for those that, that are seeing impaired to be inclusive of the services and actions and activity with just the inclusion of the API, so that the developer calls out for the service to provide that instructional in terms of what's being seen, which is really cool. All right, so shall we continue on? We
should.
All right, next up is, you saw if you were watching the show last week, which some of you in the chat room have, there's a lot of regular in there. Hey, Paul. Hey, Andrew. Sarah Lean joins us today as well in the chat. Yes, Sarah, it is the Azure Functions shirt. I was trying to find my Windows Phone one, but I didn't want to get in trouble, so I decided to go with Azure Functions today. If you watched the episode last week, you saw producer Pierre talk about the TLS certificate changes. And especially if you've hard-coded the certificates into your applications and your services, to be mindful of the changes that have occurred. This change, and this is this week's news, also reflects Azure Site Recovery. So in the spec of Azure Site Recovery, for the same aspect of certificate changes that will protect your backup for recovery should you require it down the road, obviously in the cloud-based solutions, that those certificates are changed on your behalf, and there's no requirement to make those changes. However, for on-premises implementations for Azure Site Recovery, especially when you're running physical VMware machines, as well as Hyper-V host servers, there is a requirement to actually go in and change the certificates. And we've again made a link on to IT Ops Talk in terms of all that's required in regards to what you should take in consideration for said certificates in making those changes so that your services are not interrupted. Now, this swap over is not going to happen right away. This is something that they're going to give us some time for, but it's not going to be a lot of time because you're going to see the full-on completion of the swap come in October 26th, which is actually next week. So wanted to make sure that everybody was aware if you have Azure Site Recovery in your implementation to make sure that you've gone through and checked out your digital certificates to make sure with the TLS changes that have been put forth, you are also changing the certificates on your on-premises implementation to ensure that your site recovery still stays intact moving forward.
Yeah, no, are there any other things? Because I know the big thing here is that this is because these things have been hard-coded in. Are there any other things that are hard-coded or any changes coming up in the next few months or even like next year or so that you're aware of that people need to be aware of if they have certificates hard-coded into their configurations?
Yeah, so in some instances for services in Azure, if you built out specific services that require the certificates, I know a lot of ISO standards in healthcare and in financial have those requirements. You also, and that's what Pierre had talked about last week, if you've hard-coded into those scenarios there, that too has to be changed prior to the 26th because the certificates will fail beyond that point, and that would disrupt services in respect to that. And again, it's only for hard-coded. If you've not hard-coded it, you've just pointed it to the endpoint for the certificate to be utilized, that will automatically update and you won't have to touch anything. But like I said, in some regulations, in some certifications for healthcare, financial, what have you, there is a need to actually hard code this for security's sake. And so to make sure to go through in those services that you've hard coded into and make those updates. Producer Pierre says hard coding is bad, but that's for some scenarios you have no choice, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us would agree that in general hard coding is bad, but there are some cases where that's what you have to do. But maybe instead, hopefully, this can be a thing where we can look at eventually work with people in those types of organizations and those sorts of scenarios, and maybe try to explain and say, hey, is there something else we could do other than hard coding this so that potentially you don't have the downtime, but also it's good that we have shows like this that are mentioning these things. So that's good. Be aware, 26 is around the corner.
Next up, Christina.
Yes. Okay. So this was cool. I wanted to share this. This is from our pal Abel Wang, who's just a complete rock star. He has a really great demo. This really spoke to me as somebody who is more kind of on the dev side, but I think it's just some great DevOps stuff. So one of our new services within Azure that came out within the last few months or so, it's called Static Web Apps. And one of the great things about Static Web Apps is that it has a really great pull request workflow, and you get it like right out of the box. And basically, it has basically, anytime you do a CI/CD thing, when a user issues a pull request, the app is going to be automatically built and packaged. It has a staging environment that is dynamically provisioned, and then the app with that PR request that is deployed to the newly provisioned staging environment, and then it adds a comment with the pull request with the URL to that new staging environment. So it's really, really cool. So what Abel has done is he said, okay, that's awesome that it works with Azure Static Web Apps, but what if I have something using App Service and I want the same experience? So he's basically recreated that with an application hosted in App Service using Azure DevOps, and he goes through the entire process of how to do that. And I thought that this was just a really, really great tutorial. Basically, he starts out his kind of demo app is just a very basic .NET Core web app, and he shows what his current CI/CD workflow looks like, and he just kind of takes you through every single step of creating the provision staging slots, and then giving some of those tasks a better name so that it looks a little bit better, and then using the Azure CLI to add in some links to the service principal, and creates the build pipeline. It's very cool. So I just think that this is something, if you like that kind of workflow that you see with Azure Static Web Apps, but you don't have something with Azure Static Web Apps, you have something with Azure App Service. I don't know. I was reading through this. I was actually playing around with this myself yesterday when I saw this. He even has a YML pipeline example written out. I think that in terms of infrastructure as code stuff, this was just a really great example. And we've got a link to this in the show notes in the blog post to check out everything, all the resources that Abel has done, and great stuff, Abel. And I think this is sort of ingenuity that I love to see. So I love it.
And I love it. It's a step-by-step, right? So something that we can replicate, and you've already tested. I haven't yet gone through it yet, but for me, the whole aspect of DevOps now being the norm, it's not an add-on or a new service that's being learned. And the fact that you have that historical that you can go back to in terms of the changes being made, especially in static web apps, that availability and that history is so important to understand when a problem occurs, how I can go back and find out what's going on. So definitely check that out and start playing with that in lab for testing and incorporation into static web apps. Let's continue on. The producer Pierre is shouting at me here. You only have so much time left, so we're going to continue the show. A lot of events going on. First one, it is a fortnight. Oh, why is it not sharing? Should be able to see it now. It is a fortnight. That means that there is another unfortunately, there is another episode of Patch and Switch. So they do have their show today. I don't know if you've seen it, Christina. There's been an ongoing banter between shows. We've hacked their show. They've attempted to hack our show. So it's been an interesting thing. So they do have their show this week. The other show that we wanted to call attention to is This Week on Channel 9. Christina, how long have you been doing this show? You've been doing it for a while. 3 years, right? So definitely check this out. It's so awesome to have you on the show because you and I can geek out over gadgets and stuff. But like, this show is awesome because you're going through the highlights of what's being offered, and it's obviously a Microsoft show, but you're going through all the offerings. And I'm guessing you're going to be talking about the iPhone 12 on there. Down the road. And
definitely. No, I mean, the way I kind of view it is that obviously I want to cover things that Microsoft developers and ops people are interested in, and IT pros are interested in, but it's also, it's not just Microsoft stuff. I try to, if big news is happening in our space, I want to cover it. And I was a journalist before I switched to engineering, so I kind of bring my news hat to it a little bit. And then obviously I'm a pop culture nerd, so there's some of that too. So yeah, those episodes are up on Saturdays, and youtube.com/Microsoft Developer, or you can go to the channel9.msdn.com. I appreciate the comments and the feedback. And Anthony and producer Pierre and Sarah were kind enough to be on my Microsoft Ignite recap show. So that was great. We had that a couple weeks back, and so I really appreciate you coming on for that. And
thank you for having us. Yeah, it was awesome. It was funny. A lot of people eyeing me is like, "Why don't you smile on camera?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just talking seriously, I guess." It was just funny. So we got 2 minutes. One other thing that we want to bring attention to on the events that are going on, Windows Server Summit. If you did not get enough Windows Server goodness at Ignite, don't fret. Jeff Woolsey and team have gone forward. Ned Pyle and others have put together a summit that's coming up at the end of this month that will go through the new functions and capabilities of Windows Server 2019, how that ties into Azure for your hybrid implementation, what to take into consideration when you're deploying your architecture, migrating from past versions of server, on and on and on. So definitely check that out. And then last but not least, the Microsoft Learn module of the week. We're going to tie this into Abel's CI/CD pipeline functionality for Azure Static Web Apps. How to build applications with Azure DevOps. If you are just getting into the game and you want to see, maybe Abel's post is a little bit more outside of your realm because you have yet to venture into that, this is a great precursor to go through. And what I love about Microsoft Learn, I've said this numerous times, is sandbox technology allows you to play on full offering of Azure without the requirement of creating an Azure subscription. So that's an awesome piece as well. And that's it for the show. Wow, it went really quick today. Christina, I got to have you on more often. It's so awesome to have a real journalist on the show. Pierre and I fake it all the time, but it's fun to do the show. And that's why we love doing it, right? But if people want to get a hold of you, Christina, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm film_girl on Twitter. That's probably the easiest way to ping me. But I'm extremely online. So film_girl on Twitter. But you can also, find me on LinkedIn. My email is christina.warren@Microsoft. You can bug me there, and love to hear from you. And thank you for having me on. And I think you and Pierre do a fantastic show. So
thank you. And if you want to get a hold of producer Pierre, you can get a hold of him on Twitter @WiredCanuck. And if you want to get a hold of me for some reason, you can get me on Twitter as well @WirelessLife. Christina, thank you very much again for being on the show. Everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.